I've won a boat, I've bought used boats, a whole bunch, from a John boat to a glass boat, and I've been fortunate enough the past few years to actually get a new boat every year. So I would say I'm well versed in like what I would call boatology. I know about boats. Maybe not all like fixing motors and stuff, but I know about boats. So it's 2025. If you're thinking about buying a used boat or a new boat, what we're gonna do in this video is I'm gonna run through the very specifics of what you need to look at when you're evaluating, is this boat right for me? Am I getting the most value out of my dollar? What do I need to be careful of, especially with used boats? We're gonna run through it all. Hit that like and subscribe button. Let's jump right into it. So for some of us, the most important thing is what's in the trunk, right? What's on the back? I'm talking about motors though. So the most important thing when it comes to a used boat is the motor. In my opinion, it's actually more important than the hull, but that is the second most important thing. So I've always had Mercuries. The thing you want to check for, if you got a two-stroke, you want to check compression. You want to check for oil leakage. You know, you want to check out the skeg. Has it had a new lower unit? If they let you, you want to take it to a dealer or a repair guy, whoever you trust. If you got like a mobile mechanic, and have them check out the motor. Hours, things along those lines, you know? Is it firing correctly? The motor is going to get you where you want to go, and then it's going to get you back to the boat ramp. Literally the most important part. From there though, you want to check the hull. And the hull's always tricky, and it's gonna just take elbow grease on your part. One of the biggest mistakes I've ever made when it came to buying a used boat is I didn't get down on my back like I'm changing the oil in a car and crawl under it. You want to crawl under the boat. You know, you want to look for stump gouges and how deep they are. It doesn't, you know, if it has a little scratch on the bottom, it doesn't mean the boat's canceled, but you want to know, is that into the actual core of the fiberglass? Is it into the, like the hull deep enough where it's actually going to affect and cause for like water absorption into the hull and create a problem down the line? The other thing that you want to check when you're down there is how that trailer looks. That's the other important thing, because other than getting around on the lake, getting around to the lake is hugely important. You want to get there and get home safe without having to jack up the trailer, change a tire, things along those lines. Some real simple things to look at. Is there grease behind the tire? Like, has the hub blown out? Has the grease, the bearing buddy, whatever's on there, are the seals gone, and is it flinging grease all over the back of the tire? A lot of times what guys will do, it's kind of snaky, they'll clean up the front of that tire when they're showing a used boat, and then when you actually look at the back of the tire, you're gonna see all that grease signature back behind there. So you need to crawl under that trailer and check it. You wanna check your axles. Check the brakes, take a look. A lot of times the brakes don't last very long on tandem trailers and brake trailers, so it's not an integral thing, but you want to look at it and make sure it's not all rusted out and beat out. That's another trick too, especially we're in Florida right now. Some of these guys do use their boats in salt water. You want to ask the guy who's selling the boat, hey, has this thing ever been in salt water? Because it matters for this thing, whether they flushed that motor and did it correctly. The other thing it matters is for the trailers. These trailers are not made, the majority of them, for salt water. So you want to get under there and look on the beams of the trailer for any corrosion. Do you see any rust that's building? And that can be from salt water, or it can be just because it's an older trailer, right? But that rust leads to weak points in the trailer, and you want to see, especially on the inside, if there's any places where that trailer is showing so much degradation that it could lead to a weak spot on it. The back of the boat can reveal a bunch of secrets, especially if you don't totally trust the person who's selling you the boat. The things you want to look for is how's the wiring set up? Once again, going back to kind of power management, how the switches work, does everything actually function correctly? You can look at how they have things wired up. Are there a bunch of cut wires that actually have joints in them or connectors? It looks like somebody kind of jury rigged some things. You can get an impression of how much the boat was actually changed and modded out and ask questions about it. That's all you can really do, is why is this like this? The other thing is check your batteries. Oftentimes batteries, especially lead and AGM, will actually have a date on them. If you kind of crawl in there, you're gonna have to stick your head in there, use your cell phone flashlight, look at the dates on the batteries. Are you gonna need new batteries on this used boat within a year, within 2 years? The general life of an AGM is about 5 years, 4 years, and when it comes to lead, you're talking about like 2 to 3 years. It's not that long. So you need to assess, and we're gonna talk about it with graphs as well and other accessories, how much are you actually gonna end up dumping into this boat after you've bought it. The other thing to really pay attention to is corrosion. You wanna look at corrosion on those power points, you know, on those stems of the batteries. Is there a bunch of corrosion or a bunch of buildup? Why is it there? Do you have a bad battery? Do you have bad wiring? Is the whole wire corroded? Because that can lead to issues with, say, your trolling motor. It can fry the board on your trolling motor, on your power pulse, other electronics. The other thing too is if you do have hydraulic anchors on the boat, you want to look for oil or hydraulic oil leakage. Is the pan or that reservoir on your power pole pump, is it integral? Or are there leaks? Does it not have full pressure? Little things and little signals, almost like a car, that indicate there's a little bigger problem that maybe they didn't mention to you. So one of the most important things when you're seeing a boat, obviously you're dealing with somebody, a lot of times you don't know them, right? You need to take your time because you can kind of feel rushed, right? You're going to see the boat and you want to kind of glance over it. You don't want to take a bunch of the person's time. You have to take your time. And now whether that's when you're looking at the hull and looking for imperfections, looking for scratches, it's also helpful to bring somebody with you to get a second pair of eyes on it. The other thing is too, when it comes to electronics, like switches and things like that, you want to turn everything on and everything off. And it's obnoxious, right? It takes some time, but you need to know what's not working. Like you gotta check the live wells, you need to check the lights, the running lights. You wanna play with the ignition, the tilt trim. My boat actually has a radio. You wanna make sure that works. One of the hardest things to fix on a used boat is something that isn't getting power or functioning correctly. Because the fact is as boats get, traded off, say you're like the second person down the line getting a boat, it's been wired and then it's been rewired, modded, things added to it. A lot of times that wiring gets disorganized. That's been the one awesome thing with getting a new boat is I have this thing wired simple and tight. Everything is super organized. But the more people that have their hands on a boat, the more confusing and the more kind of delegated and changed out things get. So make sure you're hitting every switch, live wells, recirc, bilge. Does it have an automatic bilge? Trim, tilt, all those things need to be tested and you need to take your time doing so and verify that they're actually working. And the best way to actually do that is when I bought used boats, I would actually print out a list. And if you go online and you Google used boat checklist, you can literally print like a generic template off of Google. There's a bunch of different ones and you can go through and just check the boxes, does it work? Does it not work? What's the problem? And verify that all that wiring is in place and all the accessories are actually functioning the way they should. So this is a little quick thing you can do. Open up the hatches. You're gonna check them for storage and how the boat lays out, right? Well, stick your head in there and take on the smells. Does it smell musty? Does it smell moldy? So oftentimes that can be an indication if the boat's stored outside, it's had a lot of water in it, or it gets water in the rod lockers and there's some like musty, moldy kind of carpet in there. The other thing to look for too is a lot of times with boats stored outside, especially if they've been outside for a really long time, mice and things like that, rodents and that can get in there and they love chewing wires. You want to look under, usually it's the captain's side where a lot of that wiring goes to the front, and verify there aren't any kind of like wire sheaths or any kind of just like, I don't know, just junk laying around like a little pile where something like chewed on some wires or things along those lines, because that can be a huge problem when it comes to making sure that all the accessories function correctly. So this one's obvious, but really it's a little more nuanced these days with how technical these trolling motors are. Obviously you want to check if the trolley works, but you really want to take a test drive in the boat, not only to check the big motor and see what it does under load, which means when it's in the water, when it actually has to push water to push the boat, but you need to deploy the trolling motor. Because aside from just standard like trolling, a lot of components in these new trolling motors are electronic. So for instance, I have a Lowrance Ghost. All the steering is digital, right? You need to make sure it can steer, not only just like work, You need to play with the power adjustment so you can turn it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The other thing is spot lock, continual on. These are sort of independent functions from the standard operation of the trolling motor, and if they don't work, it can oftentimes be an indicator that literally the most expensive part of the trolling motor is about to take a dump, and that's the board. And you don't want to be saddled with fixing a board in a trolling motor of a boat you just bought. So verify that all of those components work just by testing them. It's a one-button press, make sure it does its thing, and you're good to go. All right, you ready to talk about the bank breaker? Let's talk about accessories. And I'm not talking about live well pumps and bilge pumps. I'm talking about the fancy schmancy accessories, forward facing, sonar, graphs, freaking graph, all this stuff that really kind of like pimps out your boat. And I got a lot of it on my boat, but the trick is I use everything that I have on my boat. I built it specifically to my tastes and preferences. Now, when it comes to a used boat, you can't be that picky, right? Because you're getting something that somebody already set up, modded, and rigged out. So what you really need to assess, and for a lot of guys just coming into fishing or they're buying their first boat, it's hard to know what you want, so you need to do your research. But it's really important to figure out what you're getting based upon what you actually want to outcome with, if that makes sense. And what I'm trying to say is basically, does this boat provide exactly what you need? Or are you going to have to add a graph? Are you gonna have to change a brand of graph because you're more comfortable with a Humminbird versus a Lowrance? Do you need all the graphs that it has? Are you actually gonna be able to make a couple dollars maybe flipping a graph that the boat has and then kind of knock a little off that price point? This is where it gets a little kind of scurvy and I don't know, a little tricky when you're analyzing the boat, because you really have to understand, what do you actually need to fish with? What do you want to fish with? What does the boat that you're looking at provide? And what are you going to need to change, whether it's removing something or adding something to it, and how is that going to affect your price point? So it's things that you need to assess from a holistic standpoint and kind of look at what it's providing. Are you getting extra value? Does that value actually matter to you? Or is that extra graph really of value to you? And then kind of look at it in relation to what that total cost of the boat is and how it's going to affect that price point. Last thing, and this is like the million-dollar question, probably should have started the video with this, but do you want fiberglass or a tin boat? And really, what size do you need? So I've graduated into a fiberglass boat. I've had both. I had a Tracker 175, I had a John boat that I modded out, both aluminum style boats, but I've graduated into a fiberglass boat. Couple reasons. One, stability. The fiberglass is definitely more of a stable boat, especially if I'm running around with the dog, trying to, shoot cameras, things along those lines. It's also a little better in rough water. There's no doubt about it. So if I run 25 miles down a lake, I don't know how it's gonna be on my way back. I can handle 2 to 5 foot waves if need be in a glass boat, especially if it's over 18, 19 foot. However, there's also some kind of benefits to that tin boat. The tin boats are super easy to modify, dude. It's easy to get in there, drill some holes, mount things, get into things, and do just some tweaks on it. It's also a lot less scary to modify a tin boat. Oftentimes too, you need less motor power, less outboard power to actually get a tin boat going up to speed and running around. You get better gas mileage. It's less to tow too. It doesn't weigh as much towing down the road. But there's sort of like benefits and, like crossovers too. If you're fishing a lot of small lakes, tin boat is good. If you're fishing some big lakes mixed in, the fiberglass is a little more reliable. Be patient with your search. The right thing will come up, but be diligent about asking questions. The person selling you the boat, it's probably not your friend. Maybe it's your buddy and you can trust them, but they're not your friend. They're not there to help you. They want to sell the boat, and you need to treat them like that. So you analyze, look at everything, be super detail oriented so you don't get screwed. I mean, that's the thing. Boats are fun. You want the experience to be fun, and you want the outcome to be fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you guys got any tips on buying used or even new boats, drop them down in the comments box to help out people, because a lot of guys are getting into this sport. We're seeing a growth in fishing, which is super cool, and we want these guys to have a good time and get what they want out of the sport. And having some tips and having some kind of, some red flags for when it comes to buying used boats will really help them have a positive experience and get what they want, dude, because we're all kind of amateurs in our own way when it comes to this whole boating experience. We'll see you guys later. Hit that like and subscribe button for me. I'll put links to everything when it comes to used boats. And if you guys got any questions, feel free to hit me up directly on social media. Later, boys.